Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited for today's video as we are going to be making a tier list of the NBA Western Conference teams, giving my predictions for this upcoming season in 2025-2026. Super excited for it. I hope you guys do enjoy. If you do, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more future NBA content, and then also hype the video. That is a new YouTube thing. It helps push the content out into the algorithm. So if you do enjoy, if you want to support the channel, that's a free, easy way to do so. It only takes about 2 seconds of your time as well. And let's jump into it here. I think the best place to start is with the best of the West. Who do I think will reign supreme in the Western Conference again this season? And unsurprisingly to many, it will be the same team that I picked to come out of the West last year, to be the best team in the West last year. And that was, without a shadow of doubt, the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder are just flat out the best team in the Western Conference and very arguably the best team in the entire NBA. Not only did they win the NBA Finals this past season, but they were able to retain pretty much their entire roster. Now, they did have some small margin moves, but they're also bringing in a former first-round pick, Nikola Topic, now into the mix as well, who should give them a little bit of an extra dose of playmaking, some touch as a passer and a scorer. And I think for Oklahoma City in general, last year, you look at their injuries. Isaiah Hartenstein missed a lot at the beginning of the season. Chet Holmgren missed a large segment of the year. And despite all of that, OKC won nearly 70 games. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander proved to be the best player in the world last season, won MVP, was the scoring champion, and then ultimately won Finals MVP. It was the year of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and that might not stop. The Thunder are very well positioned to not only win the Western Conference again, but possibly repeat as NBA champions, something that has not been easy to do in Adam Silver's era as commissioner of the NBA. Now, there are some long-term challenges that OKC will have to face when it comes to shifting their roster around. Now, of course, Sam Presti is a genius, has really set the roster up well in terms of draft pick control, small contracts, really solid role players on the margins to probably go through that better than anyone. But there still will be long-term challenges, but those long-term challenges aren't really at play this upcoming season for OKC. As long as this team is even relatively healthy, as long as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's on the court, the Thunder very likely could be the best team in the NBA again this upcoming season. For me, they were the easiest team to pin on this entire list because they're just flat out the best team in the league. They were last year, and even though some other teams in the West, like Houston, like Denver, got better this offseason, I still think OKC is the best in the Western Conference. Let's shift paradigms here now to the bottom of the West. Who is the worst of the Western Conference? And in my opinion, that is the Utah Jazz. I love their new branding. I love the new look. I think everything is going to be fun about the Utah Jazz season when it comes to the aesthetics, some of the young players getting playtime. But the reality is there's not going to be a lot of wins to come by here for Will Hardy and the Utah Jazz. And that's okay. The Utah Jazz right now are focused on the 2026 NBA draft. You might be saying, well, the 2025-2026 season hasn't even started. How can they be focused on the draft already? That is the organizational direction. They're focused on putting things in place to improve their roster long term. They now have Lauri Markkanen, who is tradable at this point in time. Of course, had signed an extension that barred him from being traded last season throughout the trade deadline. This year, that is not the case, and with how Lauri Markkanen has played in Eurobasket and the direction of the Utah Jazz, could he be someone who gets dealt? Maybe, maybe not. Their brand new president, Austin Ainge, I think is in a spot where he's going to only make decisions that are obvious, beneficial, long-term choices for Utah. So when it comes to a Lauri Markkanen trade, you're not going to see him get traded for 1 or 2 first-round picks only. If the Jazz do trade Markkanen, they're going to get a huge host of assets for him. And if they don't get that, they're not going to trade him, point blank simple. And that's okay because Utah, even with Lauri Markkanen as talented and good of a player as he is, the Jazz are just so young. They are very, very poor defensively. That is a byproduct of playing as many young players as they're going to play. Look at Ace Bailey, Cody Williams, Isaiah Collier. They have a lot of high former recruits. The issue is they don't have a lot of established good NBA players right now, and that is part of the direction here. The Jazz are trying to stockpile young players, assets, draft picks, and try and point themselves in a direction that gets them not only into the playoffs again like they were with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, but they have their eyes set on contending down the road. Now they're a long ways away from that currently, and with how young they are, how bad defensively they are, I think, a very easy pick to be the worst team in the Western Conference this upcoming season. I think that's something Jazz fans are okay with, and I think Utah internally is embracing that kind of direction, especially ahead of a loaded 2026 NBA draft. Now we get into some of the more difficult decisions here, and I want to talk about the second seed in the Western Conference, and to me, that screams Houston Rockets. The Rockets, who were the second seed last year, a very big surprise for a lot of people. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I have been a big-time believer in the direction that the Rockets were moving in. I actually liked the Dillon Brooks and Fred VanVleet signings when they happened, even though there was a ton of backlash. I thought that veteran presence was going to be instrumental in Houston kind of turning a corner. I loved the Amen Thompson draft selection. You know, I thought a lot of their decisions just made a lot of sense along the way. They put in a lot of good pieces, and the Rockets have started to reap the benefits of it, and then they stepped on the accelerator again this offseason, and in a much bigger way than the Fred VanVleet, Dillon Brooks signings. They now trade Dillon Brooks and Jalen Green and draft capital over to Phoenix, and in return, they get a no-doubt first-ballot Hall of Famer, arguably a top 25 player to ever play the sport, in Kevin Durant. Now, do I think Kevin Durant is the 1A player on the Houston Rockets? When it comes to their scoring and points per game, he probably will be, but I do still think Alperen Şengün is the face of the franchise here for Houston. And even last year, in a year where his touch kind of dissipated a little bit, he wasn't as successful as a scorer last season as we've seen him be in years past in terms of an efficiency standpoint. I think with Durant now in the mix, the types of shots that Ime Udoka's offense typically relies on, which is a lot of pull-up jump shooting, the translation from Jalen Green to Kevin Durant is going to be world-bending for the Houston Rockets offense, where they go from a suboptimal shot creator in Jalen Green to one of the best in NBA history in Kevin Durant. And I think with Şengün, his ability to play in the paint, create for others, play as a roller, play as a ball handler in inverted pick and roll action, all of that is going to be accentuated big time around Durant. And the one thing that Durant really needs around him, especially at this point of his career, is long, physical, roaming defenders. And Houston has a plethora of that with Tari Eason, Jabari Smith staying in Houston. The Rockets, of course, have really not only doubled but tripled down on big ball, signing Clint Capella, retaining Steven Adams. Of course, Şengün still the starting big man there in Houston as well. The Rockets are mean, big, tall, and lean, and this team is going to be fast. They're going to rebound the ball. If anyone has a chance at upending the Oklahoma City Thunder in terms of regular season record this year, it is the Houston Rockets. I think they're going to be very tight with Oklahoma City. Now, I still think OKC is the best team in the actual West, but I think Houston has a real chance, and depending on the breakout this year of Amen Thompson offensively, depending on some shooting growth from a guy like Jabari Smith Jr., we'll see what we get from Fred VanVleet. If Kevin Durant can maintain the player he's been the last 2-3 years offensively, that would be great. Maybe even a little bit more engaged defensively, which has been kind of a real slipping point for him that not many have talked about. I think Houston's in a great spot. I loved the addition of Kevin Durant. I didn't think it was as A++++ as many seemed to think it was at the time, but I still thought it was an A+ move for them, and a move that definitely puts them in a position to compete at a very high level this season, gives them more playoff equity than they had with Jalen Green, and this team is just a force to be reckoned with in the Western Conference. Let's now look at the team I expect to be the 3 seed in the West, and for me, ultimately, I have landed on the Denver Nuggets here. Specifically for Denver, what I am anticipating is a team that, again, is forcefully led by Nikola Jokic into a successful season. Last year, they almost upended the Oklahoma City Thunder in the playoffs. That series went to 7 games before Denver just came up a day late and a dollar short in terms of talent across the board. That might be a different story this year. The addition of Cam Johnson, I think, is a huge one for the Denver Nuggets. One that, yes, Michael Porter Jr. has always played an important role in some of those past Nuggets teams, including winning an NBA championship. But Cam Johnson is just a much more steady, stable force for them when it comes to playing off the catch, being a little bit more decisive as a playmaker, someone who can swing the rock just a little bit more effectively, a bit more efficiently, than someone like Michael Porter Jr. He, I think, is going to bring a more consistent defensive emphasis to Denver as well. And then also, obviously MPJ, a great athlete, someone who was able to cut, play at the rim a little bit, but also catch and shoot over the top of guys consistently. Cam Johnson is not at fault in those areas at all, but I think also his ability to drive, handle the basketball just a little bit more, it adds a little bit more nuance into Denver's offense, which is something I think that they have badly needed. And then if Jamal Murray can play at his normal level, Aaron Gordon, if he can sustain that three-point shooting renaissance he had a year ago, the Nuggets are a real force in the Western Conference still. Obviously, when you have arguably the best player in the entire world in Nikola Jokic, a multi-time MVP, someone who has very deservingly won those awards, the Nuggets are in a great spot, and they brought in a big man in Jonas Valanciunas. I think the Nuggets are deeper. They have Day'Ron Holmes II coming back this season from his injury. I liked him a lot coming out of Dayton. The Nuggets, I think, are in a pretty good spot. We'll see how everything clicks and molds together. I do think maybe they're a little light, a little thin in the backcourt, just a hair. But I do think the Nuggets are going to be a good team again this year. Not sure if they have the overall firepower and athleticism to match up with OKC and Houston, but I think it's going to be a fun battle and a team that's going to be very enjoyable to watch this season. Let's now look at some teams that I expect to ultimately miss the postseason, including the play-in. And I think the easiest one to talk about first here is the New Orleans Pelicans. I have them slating in at 14th in the Western Conference. And part of my rationale here as to why the Pelicans will be this low, well, they've had some real shakeups, right? Troy Weaver's had his impact on this roster, which I don't necessarily love. Now, they took some huge stabs in the draft, and this is where things get a little murky. If you're an Atlanta Hawks fan watching this, you got to be pretty excited because you have access to the Pelicans draft pick this next year, very likely. If the Pelicans have as bad of a season as I project them to, because one, they're kind of young. Secondly, the trade for Jordan Poole, sending out CJ McCollum, I don't think made them a lot better right now. I do think it gives them maybe a little bit more team control long term and a player who maybe they believe in going into the next 2-3 years, a bit more than where CJ McCollum is at age-wise. But nonetheless, the Pelicans I still think are going to be a struggling team, a team that is not super well positioned to make the playoffs this year, make the postseason, make the play-in. I'm a big believer in Derek Queen. I think Jeremiah Fears has some potential to grow into, definitely. But this team is young. I think the fit on the roster is just a little weird across the board. Not a huge believer in what this team has as of right now. I'm also not the biggest Willie Green advocate either. I don't think he's been a great head coach in his time in the NBA as a coach. So the Pelicans, to me, I think are a very easy shout as a team that will miss the postseason. Another team that I feel like is in that same boat is the Sacramento Kings. Now, they have made some drastic moves. They've added into their backcourt after trading away De'Aaron Fox. This roster is not terrible. I think this is, first of all, a testament to the depth of the Western Conference. While there's probably not a ton of true championship caliber teams, I for sure see 3 of them in OKC, Houston, and Denver. The rest of the conference, I think, is a little bit shaky in terms of deep playoff pushes and having really solidified rosters that can go a long way in the West. But the Kings, even though they're a solid team, even though they have some really good talent, I'm one of the bigger Domantas Sabonis believers in the world. The Kings still fall short, and it's because their roster is just a little bit of a mix of players who probably aren't the best fits altogether. They've looked at what Chicago's done with Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan and said, hey, let's do that here in Sacramento. Never really understood, especially the DeRozan acquisition for the Kings. Just not a lot of this has made sense to me. And after trading away De'Aaron Fox, Sacramento now finds themselves in kind of a murky middle ground where they're not terrible. They have some good players. They'll probably win 35 plus games pretty safely, but it's hard for me to see them actually being a good competitive playoff team in the Western Conference. We're then going to take a look at the Phoenix Suns, another team that I think will miss the postseason, but I think their long-term direction improved drastically this offseason, trading away an old Kevin Durant, a player who no longer wanted to play for the organization, and to be able to get what they did for him, Dylan Brooks, who is probably one of their best defenders, if not their best defender at this point in time on the perimeter, next to, of course, Ryan Dunn, another guy who I do believe in a bit long-term. And then they got Jalen Green, even though, a lot of this episode so far has been me talking about how I thought Houston got better getting off of Jalen Green. I still think for Phoenix, he is the upside bet of that deal that if things pan out and if he does take I think, meaningful steps forward, especially in the weight room, getting functionally stronger. Long term, he could turn into a very solid player for them. He's going to, of course, be able to score the basketball. He's been a volume scorer his entire NBA career up to this point. But then the biggest swing part of that deal was getting that 10th overall pick, which turned into Kaman Maluach on draft night. And I think for Devin Booker, long term, it was about getting rim running centers who can protect the paint, play a bit of defense, but have huge offensive impact as screen and dive, screen and roll players who can catch lobs, play above the rim. Not only did Phoenix bring in Maluach, who was great at that at Duke, they were also able to go out and get someone like Mark Williams for very cheap, honestly, in the trade market in that deal with Charlotte. Yes, Mark Williams has dealt with injuries. He has, his stock is lower right now because of that. But Phoenix was able to turn, in my opinion, over the last 2-3 years, the worst center room in the league into a pretty competitive, competent one overnight in the offseason. And I thought that was a huge stepping stone for them moving forward, where the Suns, even though I don't see them making the playoffs this year, with Devin Booker being the top-end player, the long-term direction of this team improved drastically with the additions of Rasheer Fleming, Mark Williams, Kobe Brea, who I liked a lot. I thought was a huge second-round steal for the Phoenix Suns. And then, of course, the headliner being Kaman Maluach on draft night. I think Phoenix is in a better spot now than they were, and I'm very excited for their long-term direction, even though they are absent of a lot of future picks, and there's still some real problems there based on the aggressiveness of Matt Ishbia when he first arrived in Phoenix. I think the Suns are trying to reverse as many of those downfalls and pit traps as they can in short order. Moving on to the 4 seed in the Western Conference, I do have my Dallas Mavericks. Now, Dallas, this has been a contentious talking point over the last 6 or 7 months after the trade of Luka Doncic. First of all, Nico Harrison, was his decision smart to trade Luka? In hindsight, some people are going to say, look at the Mavericks now, their roster is maybe better than it would have been. Yeah, he got lucky. He hit a tiny % chance of winning the first overall pick and landed Cooper Flagg. A very great prospect. I try not to use the word generational, but he's maybe as close to generational as you can get without using that word. And I think for Dallas specifically, even though the process was terrible, the decision to trade away a 5-time All-NBA player who was 25 years old at the time, it was a stupid decision, a terrible choice by Nico Harrison in the Mavs front office, but ultimately things have worked out decently well for them with Anthony Davis, the extension for Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively, of course, being still an instrumental long-term centerpiece for them, the extension for PJ Washington, the draft selection of Cooper Flagg, the addition in the backcourt of D'Angelo Russell, the, of course, addition of Max Christie in that Luka Doncic trade. This team is deep, this team is talented, and they're going to be very good defensively. They're going to be big, long, tall, mean, and athletic. And in a lot of ways, I talked about Houston and how they have been able to build this defensive infrastructure and nucleus that is just going to be nearly impenetrable, and then the addition of offensive talent, Dallas finds themselves in a very similar ballpark, right? They have a top 20-ish player in the world in Anthony Davis. They have, a great offensive young player in Cooper Flagg, who I think is going to experience some bumps in the road, especially with Dallas' spacing early on. But this Mavs roster is still very good. And I think the Mavericks, even though, again, the process was terrible, they have come out on the other side in a very good spot because they won the first overall pick in the lottery. And with that lottery system, the way that it all panned out, the way that it all worked, many still call it rigged, the Mavericks still have a very bright future ahead of them. And I think Cooper Flagg, even though this Mavs roster is relatively old around him, outside of PJ Washington, Derek Lively, and a couple others, this Mavs roster is very good right now and should be able to compete long-term because of Cooper Flagg and his presence, his impact, and his two-way play even early in his NBA career. Moving on now to the 5th seed in the Western Conference, I am putting the Los Angeles Clippers. They earned a top 6 seed last year, and even when Kawhi Leonard missed a long duration of the season, especially early on in the year, James Harden, All-NBA honors once again, proved to still be one of the best pick-and-roll players in the entire league. The breakout emergence of Ivica Zubac. He's always been a starting caliber center. Last year, he was a near All-NBA caliber center, And that transformation, not only did it hoist up the Clippers defense with some great point of attack defenders in the mix as well, with Derrick Jones Jr., Chris Dunn, of course, the Clippers were able to maintain a lot of their core key pieces last year. And even though they were very good last year, won 50 games, this Clippers team actually had some significant flaws last season. They didn't really have a backup point guard. They were just one guy shy on ball handling. They didn't have enough shooting, and they were rather unathletic for a 50-win team. They addressed a lot of that this offseason. The addition of Bradley Beal on a very cheap contract after his buyout from the Phoenix Suns. This gives them another guy who, when Kawhi Leonard doesn't play, can put the ball in the hoop. He has maintained good efficiency throughout his tenure, even with the Phoenix Suns. And this is a player where, and for a long time, I've been anti-Bradley Beal in terms of the value of his contract and how big that contract was. It doesn't mean that I thought Bradley Beal wasn't a good player. Bradley Beal's been a good player in the NBA for a long time. The issue is he wasn't $50+ million, no trade clause good. And I think now, in a different role, in a different city, on a different team with the Clippers, who are more defensively oriented, Bradley Beal's strengths can play out in a much different way. I think he's a much better fit next to James Harden than he was next to Kevin Durant and or Devin Booker. And I think this Clippers team is very well positioned, not only with the addition of him, but then also the addition of John Collins, someone who in years past, when he played alongside a guy like Trae Young, was a phenomenal lob finisher, a lob threat, something that we definitely will see James Harden utilize. I think the Clippers got a lot bigger, they got a lot better, they're able to shoot the ball, and they added more playmaking, some more athleticism, and they're going to still maintain that defense-first identity, with Jeff Van Gundy being ultimately their defensive coordinator again this season. The Clippers are going to be very, very good, and I think they're going to be a real force to be reckoned with in the Western Conference. Moving on to the 6th seed, I am going to put the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Wolves, under Chris Finch, have been extremely competitive year in, year out, and it doesn't hurt either that Anthony Edwards has been such a growing force for them. Every single year, he just gets better and better and better. His development is about as incredible as you can imagine. If you go back to his tape at Georgia, even though he was a high-volume three-point shooter, he wasn't an effective one. He was a high-volume ball handler for the Georgia Bulldogs, wasn't an effective one at the college game in the SEC. But slowly but surely in his NBA career, every single year we've seen his pick-and-roll efficiency uptick. We've seen his decision-making, his cross-court passing. He's actually become one of the better skip passers in the entire NBA, which has been an under-discussed point. His defense has slowly crept up. Think back to early in his career, even the Wolves' first playoff appearance where they were facing the Memphis Grizzlies. Anthony Edwards just consistently would have kind of moments defensively where he fell asleep, got caught ball watching, and would hurt his team pretty drastically. That has slowly started to diminish and kind of seep away. Now, it does peak up time to time, but I think all in all, Anthony Edwards, not only has he improved drastically as a playmaker, he's improved tremendously defensively in terms of his, kind of anticipation, his attention to detail, and also, of course, the most pointed effort, one that many people realized last year, his three-point development and progression is nuclear. It's out of this world. The growth he's had from a very poor high-volume three-point shooter at Georgia to where he is now as someone who was right toward the top of the league in terms of three-point makes, three-point percentage, overall efficiency, pull-up jump shooting, all of that, Anthony Edwards just continues to sky and sky and sky. And first of all, it's a testament to Tim Connolly. He's put the players around him to help him in those areas. Rudy Gobert as a screen and roll player has been instrumental, I think, in really improving that playmaking component, sucking in the defense as Gobert rolls to the rim. That's been a key part, but then also investing in Naz Reid, making key decisions, bringing in Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle in a deal to try and, kind of maintain a lot of this roster. Aggressively going to get Rob Dillingham, drafting Terrence Shannon Jr. The Wolves, even when they've seen some of the long-term issues coming into the foreground for them when it comes to the new cap mechanics that were new after the Rudy Gobert trade, right? The Wolves have been able to reinvent themselves. Yes, it did cost them Karl Anthony Towns, a very great player that they had to trade away, unfortunately, to make some of this stuff work. The Wolves have stayed competitive, made another run to the Western Conference Finals last year. I don't foresee that this season for them, but I do think that they will be very good once again. And depending on how Anthony Edwards grows, maybe it's a mid-range jump shooting this year, which a healthy tick up could make him an unbelievable, top 2 player in the world possibly. Again, I'm a little skeptical about that, but he is a top 10 player in the world for sure. He's an unbelievable athlete, an unbelievable player when it comes to his growth year in, year out, and I think the Wolves are going to continue to reap the benefits of his development individually. Let's move to the bottom half of the play-in, and now the team that I see earning the 10 seed in the Western Conference will be the Memphis Grizzlies. I think they lost a key part of their team when they traded away Desmond Bane, but there was a reason that they did that. Again, financial literacy is a key part of making decisions in the NBA right now. And Desmond Bane on that big of a contract with the Grizzlies kind of being a little landlocked right now in the West, where they're not really a true contender. They're not bad enough to bottom out. They had to shake something up, and they got a lot of draft equity for Desmond Bane, and they were able to go out, draft Cedric Coward, someone who I think is going to be a pretty pivotal player for them moving forward. But then they were also able to extend Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, admittedly, I did not love the value of that contract. Do I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is worth the amount that he got paid? No, I do not. But I understand why they were doing it. Former Defensive Player of the Year, obviously a core piece to their team, had a huge breakout season last year offensively as well. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a very good player. I don't think he's an elite player. He's getting paid like an elite player now. We'll see how that ages for Memphis. But they were able to bring in Ty Jerome. I think that's going to help their bench unit in a big way. They're going to be able to shoot the ball as well again this season with both Jerome and Cedric Coward in the mix. I think Zach Edey, especially with a heavier dose of pick and roll play this season, will have a much more successful year as a pick and roll player. If you go back to all my pre-draft evaluation on Zach Edey, I talked about him as someone who could potentially turn into a dominant pick and roll big man because of his size, hands, and touch. All of those things I think are going to play out in a positive way, especially as the game slows down for him. You know, a lot of people were being critical of him as a rookie. I myself was not extremely high on Zach Edey as a draft prospect in general, but I still had him, you know, right around the top half of the first round in his draft, because I think the size, first of all, you can't teach, and the touch is very irreplaceable in the NBA. So there's going to be a lot of benefit from him still being on this roster. His size, his touch, his value as a play finisher, I think is going to be instrumental. I think this Grizzlies team, not only do they draft well, obviously Jalen Wells was a huge hit for them last year as well. They just find ways to win games, and John Morant's still the best player on this team. If he's healthy, if he's able to go, he's going to give them a chance night in, night out. You know, I thought the first round of the playoffs was a huge testament to how far away this team is from competing at a contention level, but at the same time here, it's still a good roster, a good team that's going to be able to, you know, win a fair number of games in the Western Conference, even after trading away Desmond Bane in kind of a franchise-altering decision. Now you might be wondering, okay, well, you've got 4 teams left here and only 3 play-in spots yet to go. Which one of these 4 teams is not making the play-in this season? And I am unfortunately going to say the Portland Trail Blazers. I think they're very close. Honestly, I have them pretty much neck and neck here with Memphis. I am putting the Blazers just a hair out. I think their roster is still relatively young. Of course, the addition of Drew Holiday does help in terms of bringing some of that veteran experience, but they are still banking on a lot of young player development, and it's hard to foresee how that's going to exactly play out. Donovan Clingan, really like him as a player. I think he's going to be tremendous defensively for them, as also as a screen and dive player, and then also looking at his playmaking juice off the top of the key and delay action. I think there's going to be a lot to like there long term. For Portland, of course, Denny Avdia is a great player who has taken massive strides forward. But really the big swing position for the Blazers this year is going to be that point guard spot. They did sign Damian Lillard, of course, for the long-term point guard position. He'll definitely be in play for them. But Scoot Henderson, I think all cards are in on Scoot Henderson this season. And the Blazers need him, not want him to be great. They need him to be great this season if they want to be a playoff team. And that's where I find a little bit of hesitancy. I do like Scoot Henderson still. I think he has become massively undervalued by NBA media and a lot of people who speak about the NBA. But Portland, I do think maybe indexing very hard on him this year probably isn't the best for their actual playoff hopes. It doesn't mean that I don't think Scoot Henderson could have a good season, that I don't think he'll develop. I do think he's going to actually have a pretty improved year from where he's been the last couple of years, especially with the absence of Anthony Simons. I think there's going to be more clarity on who's who in their offense. They're going to play through Avdia more. They're going to play through Scoot Henderson more. Probably lean on Donovan Clingan a bit more with DeAndre Ayton now out. I like all of that a lot for Portland. I think the Blazers are going to be a pretty competitive team. They're going to definitely be able to guard Toumani Camara, one of the best wing defenders in the entire NBA. This team's going to be very, very good. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch. They might be a year or two away yet from being a true postseason type team, but I think they're going to be right on the brink of that this year, and I'm very excited to see how their year goes. So no criticism here, Blazers fans. I'm very excited about the future. I actually think this is one of the best positioned teams now moving forward when it comes to trade flexibility, draft pick control, and making long-term decisions. I think Portland's been doing a very good job of that in the last 24 months, and I'm very excited to see how this team continues to move going forward. Now let's talk about the San Antonio Spurs. Where will I put them? Are they a top half of the play-in team, 7 or 8 seed, or will they be a 9-10 seed? With Memphis in that 10 spot, I will be putting San Antonio at number 9. And for a lot of the same reasons I talked about Portland. Now, the Spurs do have one thing that Portland doesn't, and that is a top 5 player in the world, arguably, in Victor Wembanyama. I think very likely this could be the beginning of Wembanyama's MVP candidacy. This is the season where I think he, again, takes another huge step forward. His progression, his development will be like nothing we have ever seen before. The first year of his career came in a little shaky on offense, but a clear defensive impact when he was on the floor. The second season, it became undeniable how dominant he was on both ends of the floor. This is the year where he goes head and shoulders, both figuratively and literally, above everybody, and starts to really wreak havoc on games. When he's in, San Antonio is going to be awesome. Now, there are still going to be moments where the Spurs are kind of internally fighting a little bit against Wemby because their team is really young. They don't have a lot of great veterans. They have a very good one in De'Aaron Fox, don't get me wrong. But like Harrison Barnes, like it's not a team that's really ready to compete at a super high level, talking top 3, top 4 seed in the Western Conference. They're just not there yet. If you look at what OKC has around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you look at what Houston has across their entire roster, look at what Denver has implemented around Jokic, look at what Dallas has around Anthony Davis, Cooper Flagg. Their team is very, very deep, veteran-oriented, and really good. The Spurs just aren't there yet, and they will get there with time, right? They're going to be relying on second overall pick Dylan Harper. They have another top 10 pick, Stephon Castle, going into his second NBA season. This team is just very young yet at this point in time, and there's a lot of unproven elements when it comes to winning in the NBA for this team. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to be incapable of winning. It just, right now, I think they're probably a year away from really being that top echelon team, and that's okay. That's what San Antonio wants. It's about internal development. Wemby's developing at a rate that the Spurs roster probably can't keep up with currently, and that's okay because he's going to lift this team. There's going to be a lot of good experience that he gains and the rest of this roster gains from this upcoming season. Could they make the playoffs through the play-in? I definitely could see that as a possibility. When it comes down to having to win 2 games to get in, when you have Wembanyama, you're going to have a good chance at upsetting some team along the way. So this could be the first year we see Victor Wembanyama in the actual playoffs. I do see a postseason berth as very likely for San Antonio, and I think the Spurs are in a great position not only for this upcoming season, so if you're a Spurs fan, you got to feel excited, but long term, this team is in an awesome spot with a very young roster, a lot of team-controlled contracts, and a lot of upside moving forward with draft pick control, trades that they can make, and internal development progression along the way. I think San Antonio is going to be awesome. Now when it comes to the top half of the play-in, who do I think will be the 7 seed? Who do I think will be the 8 seed? I'm ultimately putting Golden State as the 7 seed in the Western Conference and the Los Angeles Lakers as the 8 seed. The reason for this, with Golden State, first of all, putting them as the 7 seed, I think is, first of all, a testament to how well they played last year after the Jimmy Butler acquisition. This team, as long as they're healthy, specifically Steph Curry, they're going to be good. Steve Kerr, when he has Steph Curry on the floor, has been a tremendously successful coach, and when he hasn't had Steph Curry, he has fallen short time and time again. He does not find ways to win without Steph Curry, but when he has Steph Curry, the entire dynamic of the team changes, the entire spacing on the court changes, and the amplification of talent changes drastically. If you want to make an argument for why Steph Curry could maybe be the greatest player ever, you look at how successful Golden State's been without him and how abysmal they've been without him. And it's a real testament to his greatness, his spacing, his gravity, his talent, his shooting, his selflessness. Everything that Steph Curry does on the basketball court amplifies all of the guys around him to the nth degree. And Golden State really just hinges on him. Even with Jimmy Butler, even with Draymond Green, they have 2 Hall of Fame players around him. the season really comes down to how Steph Curry plays and how healthy he is. And when he's on the court, we know how well he's going to play. He's going to be awesome. And it's not even about points per game. It's not about assists per game for Steph. It's about impact. It's about gravity. It's about how much attention and eyes he draws from the defenders all the time. The Warriors, if he's healthy and Jimmy Butler's healthy, this team's going to be really good and a real force to be reckoned with. The Lakers, this is a real mixed bag here. And this is not any kind of disservice to Luka Doncic. I think Luka Doncic is a top 2 or 3 player in the world on any given night. The issue is this Lakers roster is just, quite frankly, not that great. LeBron James is a tremendous player for his age. LeBron James is probably still a top 15-ish player in the world. I don't really believe in individual player rankings. That's why when I say these, I give like kind of loose ranges of where the guy could be ranked theoretically. The issue is this Lakers team isn't really built on defense. I have questions about their transition defense. I have questions about the rim volume for DeAndre Ayton. If you look at the players who have best succeeded with Luka Doncic at center, it has tremendously been and overwhelmingly been lob threats. Guys who screen, roll hard all the way to the rim, finish at the rim. That's not DeAndre Ayton's game. Look at his free throw numbers. He doesn't get to the line a ton because he doesn't play at the rim a ton. He doesn't put a lot of pressure on the defenses, and he doesn't weaponize his physicality and his athletic gifts as well as he could. Now, the Lakers have a lot of talent. Rui Hachimura, former top 10 pick. DeAndre Ayton, former number 1 overall pick. This team is talented. It's about how all of it comes together and fits into a two-way team dynamic. And when you do have Luka Doncic, even when he's at the best tip-top shape, he's never going to be an elite defender. He's never going to be a great defender. At best, he's a serviceable one in a team defense. And the Lakers right now, I think they're going to index heavily on Rui Hachimura and Jared Vanderbilt defensively. I don't love that. I also don't love how Rui Hachimura is very hesitant to actually play off the catch, shoot the basketball. This Lakers team is talented. I'm not sure it's the perfect blend of their roster. And I think, admittedly, like Lakers fans, this offseason were upset about their lack of aggressive moves. And the fact that they didn't go out there and make huge splashes in free agency. Obviously, they got Ayton. That was a good get for them, given their center position and the need it had. But this Lakers team, I do think, is just a dime short when it comes to competing with teams that I think are better fits together, like Oklahoma City, like Houston, and even in a lot of ways like Denver, where the roster just kind of makes more sense on paper than what Los Angeles has. And the Lakers, very good talent-wise. Jared Vanderbilt's going to be obviously an important piece defensively for them. We'll see if he can provide anything offensively this year to a reasonable standard. So these are my predictions for the Western Conference. Make sure to comment down below where you disagree with me. Let me know what you think. Tell me your predictions down below as well. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Really hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.